Hello world and welcome back. I am Karhu the Great Bear of the North and this is Planet Zoo franchise mode. We are in Karhu, Alexandria. In confession time, right off the bat, I unfortunately forgot to record the in-game audio, my live microphone musings, so this is all done after the fact, so this might be a little bit disjointed and weird, but what we're going to be doing today, I mean, you've already seen the photos, you've already seen the pictures, you've already seen the videos, but we're going to be building a little bit of an Akropolis, that mountain top, that hilltop temple and city that the Greek world is known for. We've got one in Corinth, we've got the famous one in Athens, and we figured I might as well build one in Alexandria too, because this map has fantastic rock outcroppings like this. So let's build two temples, one rectangular temple on the side and one circular temple on the top. But you may notice that I've already built this like waterfall channel, and there's a specific reason for that. I have a concept here. The Nile River was the lifeblood of ancient Egypt. Without the Nile, they had nothing. So just as in the first episode, I talked about how using hippopotami in a zoo might be a sign of control of nature, of the wild forces, and this would give Pharaoh or the ruling class a little bit more power. Because if they can control even the wild, ornery hippos, they can control everything, right? It's really easy to claim to be a god king when you have nature at your disposal. So in addition to being able to control the hippos, what if we controlled the Nile itself? If you can control the Nile itself, you can control the lifeblood of absolutely everything. So this waterfall system, this natural spring, I'll call it, I don't know, maybe there's some kind of engineering device with an Archimedean screw there that's constantly driving water to the surface. Whatever it is, I figured it would be a powerful statement. They can create a river from nothing. They can create the Nile. They can create life. To me, that's a powerful image and something that I think Alexander or whoever the ruling class might be told me a little bit later on, but it's something that the ruling class might want to have in their disposal. So that's why we have that waterfall channel flanked by the Egyptian style pillars and things like this. But first, let's start by building this temple. And I don't really know who this temple is to. Maybe Artemis, goddess of the hunt, maybe somebody like that, maybe a goddess of nature. I don't really know, but I like how it turns out. So those things that I'm adding right there above each of the columns in that layer right there, those are called triglyphs. And in doing the research for this episode and learning how to build a Greek temple, I noticed that there's something called a triglyph design controversy. And this was apparently a really huge disagreement, an argument even, that occurred in ancient Greece over centuries, over absolute centuries, over how to properly balance it. Because if you have the triglyphs and they're centered right on top of each of the columns, then there's actually going to be a gap between the outermost triglyph and the edge of that stone area right there. And they thought that this was aesthetically displeasing. The Romans later on, they didn't care. They're like, yeah, whatever, there's a gap, deal with it. But for the Greeks, and the things that I'm coloring in blue, these are the triglyphs. And so the Greeks had many different things. They could squeeze in the outermost columns in order to balance things a little bit better so that the space between each triglyph was right. They could extend the space between the outermost triglyphs, but that wasn't appealing either. And the solution that I just came up with, that many of the ancient Greeks also agreed with, was just simply make the outermost triglyph a little bit wider, to kind of wrap it around the corner. And that's what I did. I think it's simple. I think it's elegant. To me, it's aesthetically pleasing, but then again, I wasn't an ancient Greek. I wasn't completely obsessed with ratios and perfection and all these different things the same way that they were. So, it works for me. But one of the things, if you are an eagle-eyed viewer, you may notice that the original temple that I designed was 5 hexes wide, was 20 meters wide. This one is only 16 because you can't actually make an odd unit-wide temple using the roof pieces in Planet Zoo, which super frustrates me because in my research I didn't find many temples that had 5 columns across the front. 6 columns across the front? Absolutely. 7? Yes. 4? Yes. But very few had 5 across the front. So it's actually quite displeasing to me. Because for the ancient Greeks, they had the golden ratio, which is approximately 1.6. 1.62 or whatever. And this is what actually the numbers in the Fibonacci sequence tend to approach. The ratio between one number to the next approaches 1.6 at the end. So all of these mathematical concepts are related. It was the golden ratio, and it's beautiful. And for them, for the ancient Greeks, that was the width of the temple's front to its length. I mean, over time, temple ratio width length was changed, but for the most part, 1.6 was considered ideal. And if this were 5 units wide and 8 units long, that is going to be exactly 1.6, and it's perfect as chef's kiss. But this is 4 wide and 7 long, and it's not quite 1.6. It's 1.578, and it just bothers me a little bit more. So when I said I wasn't as completely bothered by perfect ratios as the Greeks were, I may have been lying. I may have been exaggerating on that, but yeah, this is the best that I could do in terms of Planet Zoo's pieces, the things that I actually had available to me. And I wanted to create this balcony over the side so people could actually stand up there and they could look over the zoo below them, because there will be animals in the area right immediately below this Akropolis. But just the way that the paths worked and the curves worked, it would look really ugly. So I figured this series of planters would be a nice little touch with the flowers in there, and it's nice. It's nice. I like the rhythm. I like the balance of everything, and having the cypresses there on the side of the temple actually echoes the front of the hippodrome that we created in the last episode. So there is that connection. But also, if this is how tall the tree are, it really actually lengthens or increases the perceived height of the temple itself, because it's now towering over the trees. And then the waterfall, being taller than the temple, looks even larger by comparison. It's this kind of playing with sightlines, playing with perspectives that I think is something that the Greeks would have loved. Again, this is one of the reasons why they really liked that golden ratio of 1.6, was they felt that it was aesthetically pleasing. But they really loved ratios. They really loved visual harmonies. So I figured I could echo that a little bit in what we are here. And yes, these rail pieces are from the Indian set. We used them as the railings for the hippo overlook in episode 1, so I figured we could reuse them here too. Again, just kind of tie everything together from an aesthetic perspective. So, this temple that we're building now, this Waterfall temple, and boy, if you've ever played the Zelda games, you hate the water temple levels. And quite frankly, building this water temple, I hated building this too, because it is circular, or in this case octagonal, the base, the stylobate. It was really difficult to get all the angles to line up. It's not quite perfect, and that kind of frustrates me. Going back to the whole, I really want the angles to be perfect. But overall, I am very pleased with this. And these kinds of round temples are called tholos temples. And if you have ever visited the United States or France or even Rome, you'll notice that there are very circular temples. The Pantheon in Rome is a version of this. The top of the Capitol building in the United States in Washington, D.C. is also a neoclassical tholos, that kind of dome unpendentive style. So even though we typically see the rectilinear temples as being the classical Greek temple, and the vast majority are those, when we're talking about late Bronze Age Greece or early Greek periods, these circular temples were actually extremely common and extremely plentiful. They just didn't survive nearly as much as the later stage rectilinear temples did. And the reason I wanted to go circular with this is because I mean, we just have a rectilinear temple right below it, so having two right on top of each other would seem a little bit overkill, but it's also because I wanted this to be an earlier style of architecture as well. The rectangular temple that we just built, the temple to Artemis, is using, as close as I could approximate, the Ionic style, which uses circular fluted columns on a base above the stylobate, the pedal, the stepped pedestal that all of these temples are on. And then it has the column capital, the head, the scroll work on top of that. But this one, this older Doric style, the rounded columns just lie straight on the stylobate. There is no base separating the two, and the column capitals are a little bit simpler in design compared to the Ionic or the much later Corinthian styles. So I just wanted to showcase that this was almost an older style temple because it relates to the earth, it relates to forces of nature, it relates to water. And so I figured something that's older, something that's more chthonic even, would be a little bit more appropriate for this temple. And once I get all the water put back in, you'll actually see that the water is like coming up from this well spring in the ground, and it's creating this waterfall and everything. So I just really like the style of it. It's not as ornate as the other one, it's not as overdeveloped, but it is beautiful in its own way. And with regards to the roof, I really wanted to do a kind of a conical roof. But doing that in Planet Zoo would require so many custom pieces that I just didn't think it was worth it. I also could have done a dome roof, but those were a much later development. So I figured this wooden lattice, dark blue and white, it would create this very interesting design on the top, and I figured this would be kind of an appropriate top, an appropriate roof for this. Again, it would be open to the sky, it's open to the elements, which I think fits the concept for this particular temple a little bit better. On the inside we have some offerings, we have some flowers, some larger, more ornate planters as you're overlooking the rest of the zoo. But I'm really, really enjoying how this one turned out. I still don't know exactly how people are going to get to the top. I still haven't figured out the path system in a way that I'm satisfied with, which is why I haven't done much of the foliage around this water temple up at the top of the hill. But once this is all done and this all kind of comes together and grows over, I think it will be a really, really nice touch. And I added a little bit of like this offerings temple. So we've got oranges and grapes and things like this, which again, it's a small little touch, but I think it adds quite a bit to the overall realism of what we're trying to accomplish here. And I decided at this time I would add some offerings to the front of the rectilinear temple down below. We've got some eggs, we've got some oranges, we've got some baskets, we've got some crates, and I just wanted to kind of explore a little bit about what's going on, some of the different pieces that we have. We've got a basket of flowers, these kinds of things, lots of candles, love the candles. But I've also added some Indian draperies, specifically with regards to elephants. And I know that doesn't necessarily fit the Greek style, but those were A, the only real tapestries that we have in this game, and B, Alexander did make it to the borders of modern day India. He would have known what elephants were like in terms of the Persians were using them. There may have even been some elephants in North Africa, so he definitely knew what they were. So I thought adding these non-Greek but still Indonesian, or maybe we can call them not Indonesian, Indian, we could call them Persian maybe. Again, people with whom Alexander would have known a lot about. So we're just trying to create this mix, this melange of different styles. And that's kind of what we're going for, rather than any complete historical accuracy to any one thing. And Babylon was also one of the last places that Alexander conquered before his death in 323 BCE. And Babylon is noted for the Hanging Gardens. And I thought, we don't really know what the Hanging Gardens would have looked like. But to me, I imagine them as these very, very bright walls, polished marble or limestone, with just cascades, almost waterfalls of foliage just kind of tumbling out of these different levels. And I've always been inspired by that in terms of when I'm creating in these kinds of games. I did at least for me, a really cool Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 kind of Hanging Gardens back in the day, like a decade ago. But I never shared that with anybody, so I figured I could recreate that. And this is, from an aesthetic perspective, really what I want this zoo to look like. We have paths that are... The paths are straight, because the Greeks, like Alexandria, was designed on a grid system with this major, massive east-west, roughly, thoroughfare, and then different streets branching off of that. And many, many Greek cities were based on these designs, as were Roman cities later on. But what I wanted was these straight streets to go through these almost wild areas. And in climbing up the side of this hill, I thought, why don't we just add a whole bunch of trees, a whole bunch of bushes, a whole bunch of flowers, just to really add to this. This is supposed to be a wild space. And the Greeks and Egyptians didn't really do gardens the same way that the Persians did, or later people did. Greek, quote, gardens were mostly just minimally kept natural spaces. Later on in this episode, I will be showing you a sacred grove behind the rectilinear temple that kind of fits this. So I thought this kind of wild overgrowth of different bushes and different trees, all of which are from Africa or West Asia or Europe. So they are, sort of accurate to the space that we're building in Alexandria. I thought it would kind of bring the nature, this unkempt, this wild, the lack of straight lines with this very clearly defined path. And I thought that juxtaposition would be something that is, at least to me, it's extremely powerful. We have these rhythmic, linear patterns of the columns, of the pedestals, of everything with this temple, even the steps. And then you have just this wild growth. And I don't know, I really enjoy these steps. And we're going to see a lot more of this. We're going to see this on the side of the hippo exhibit. We're going to see this on the side of almost all of the hills are going to be built up like this. So I hope you guys like it. Like, what do you think? Is this an interesting aesthetic choice, or would the stark clear walls almost have been a little bit more interesting? Because, I mean, if you've seen my first series, you know that I love these kind of wild, pseudo feral gardens. So we're going to be seeing a lot more of those in this particular playthrough, in this particular zoo. And I really like playing with levels. With everywhere you look, it's going to be interesting. You're going to see things from new perspectives and new viewpoints. And I don't really know if I'm accomplishing it, but that's something that I really do want to try to do. I don't want this to be a zoo so much as I want it to be a statement, a collection, a focal point. It's power projection, really. And being able to control nature in such a way is really, I think, the core concept of this entire zoo. This is extremely difficult to maintain a zoo, especially if we're talking 2,300 years ago, shortly after Alexander's time. So all of these things, these are real powerful things. These are real, they're not easy to do, but simply doing it is kind of the point. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave you on a bright, beautiful dawn here in Karhu, Alexandria. We've created an ionic rectilinear temple, a round Doric tholos temple. We've created pathways that are covered in foliage. We've created these massive Akropolis. But one of the things that I haven't shown you yet, and I mentioned it earlier on, is this sacred grove. There's no reason for anybody in the game to come here. There's no animals, there's no services, there's no food, there's no gifts. It's just a quiet place of contemplation and relaxation behind the temple. It's just a fountain, some benches, and a garbage can. And this is my favorite place that I've built anywhere in any of my zoos so far. It's just this area right here. And I love it. I hope you do too. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to Karhu, Alexandria. If you like what you see, please please subscribe, please comment. But most importantly, and I really do mean this, have a fantastic day in the sacred grove, this gift from me to all of you. Bye everybody. See you next time.